Okay, your next step is to clip the edges. I probably should have taken that out and re-sewn it, but I didn't. But I think I'll still have enough fabric so that when I sew my armpits together, it'll still be okay. But if you're really particular, if you make a mistake like I did, take it out. Just take the stitches out and do it again. Okay, so now we're going to sew the armpits. So before I do that, though, I want to clip around my neckline, and I'm clipping here so that when I turn this inside out, it will lay flat. Now, as far as the denim, I top stitched it all the way around the whole denim vest. On the fur, I didn't, because I didn't want that line of stitching to show. So I'm going to wait and see what happens on here to see if I'm going to top stitch it or just turn it inside out. I won't know until I get to that point. So next step, line up your arm seams, and I'm going to sew all the way around the arm seam, not the side seam. I'm just going to sew around the arm seam. I'm going to open this up and sew it, not the side, just the arm. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, so here we are. We're at the point where we've sewn our neck. We have clipped that neck edge, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to thin these seam down. We're going to thin these shoulder seams down, because we're going to have to get this side up and through that opening through the shoulder. Same on this side. We're going to turn this inside out and get it over to the other side. But the only way you want to do that so you can make it easy on yourself is you want to trim these seams down, these shoulder seams down. And you also want to clip the whole area around the armholes. And the reason you're doing this is so that when you do turn it to the other side, that it will lay flat as you're wearing it, so it doesn't bunch up on you. Okay, but the easiest thing is to cut that shoulder seam down a little bit on both sides, so that you don't have to tug it through. I mean, you might have a little bit of a tug, but if you can trim that down, it won't be near as bad. And yeah, this fur, I call it fur. I don't call it fleece. Fleece doesn't shred. Doesn't usually shred like this. This is more like that mink fur that I used. Okay, so same thing on the other side. Alright, well, I'll do this one later. Okay, so your next step is, once you have those both sides trimmed down so you can pull it through, let me get this one out of the way so I don't cut the seam by mistake. So trim those down. Just trim them in half, because I put 1/4 inch seams, so just trim them in half. Open it up and see if you can grab this easily and pull it through. So I'm going to go ahead and, now when I did this with the denim, I didn't have any trouble at all, because it just came right through. You might have to work with it, and if you've got something you can use as a, you can try using your loop turner if you want to. I think it's too thick of a fabric to try and use your loop turner with. So just keep working it until you can get it through that other side of the sleeve. And then once you can grab a hold of it, you'll just be able to pull it right through. Just keep working it out, and it'll come right out eventually. Just try not to tug so hard that you end up warping the fabric, because you do want it to look nice when you're done. But like I said, it was so easy when I did the denim, it just came right through. But the more bulkier your fabric is, of course, the harder it is going to be to turn it from the outside to the inside. Okay, so there's one side, and in this case I probably will not do any top stitching, because if I do top stitching I'm going to ruin the fur. Okay, so I'm going to pull through the other side just like this side, and then I'll come back and show you what the next step is. Okay, the one thing I forgot to mention is I shrunk my pattern down to 90%. So what I have space-wise to get through on these shoulder seams are going to be a lot less if you're making this for the American girl. Can you see the difference there? I've got probably a good ½ of an inch difference between mine and my smaller version for the Journey Girls than the American Girl version that you get with the actual pattern. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You're going to have plenty of room to pull your fabric through. It's not going to be a chore. Okay, so I've got my pieces pulled through. Okay, what you want to do before you go any further is you want to check to make sure that your arms are laying down flat, your shoulder is your back across the neck is laying down flat, because once we put in the next couple seams, you're not going to be able to go up in there and do any clipping. You can also take your brush too if you want to and do some, but you might as well wait till we're done. Okay, so the next step is to take our, we're going to sew our side seams. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to line up, open up our seam, and we want to line up these two seams on each side, and we're going to sew across there. And basically that's just sewing up your side seams right here. Okay, I'm going to do that next. Okay, what I failed to mention on that last part was when you're doing the middle seam right here, just push all your fur up. Okay, so just sew, push all your fur up when you're sewing that seam, because by the time you're going to turn it around and put that fur down to do that last seam on these vests, it's not going to matter because it's all going to end up in the same spot. So just go ahead and push it up. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sew up the corduroy, push all my corduroy towards the fur, and then sew down in that location. Okay. Okay, we are at the final stages. I have my vest completely sewn up except the bottom row. Okay, all my armhole seams are sewn up. My side seams are sewn up. The only thing left is the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to push everything on the top as far in as I possibly can, and I'm going to line up my bottom seams, and I am going to sew from here all the way across as far as I can possibly get, which is going to be somewhere in the middle of the back of the vest. But I'm going to have to leave myself an opening because I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. So the only thing that I'm going to have left open by the time I'm finished sewing across here and sewing across here, pushing them back through this little hole that I'm going to leave between here and here, that's all that I'm going to have left to hand sew. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, I'm shaking the camera. Okay, I've got the whole thing pinned, and the reason I did that is because I want to make sure that I leave, see this green pin here and this green pin here? I want to make sure that I don't sew in between those, because I'm going to have to push this out, and I'm going to push this out through that open section right here. But because this fur has such a tendency to want to stretch on me, that I wasn't about to take the chance of sewing without pinning the whole thing down. Otherwise, I might have just stretched it right out of shape. So that's one thing you got to worry about when you're dealing with any kind of a stretchy fabric like fur, fleece. This is more fur to me than it is fleece. But But anyway, make sure that you leave that open there. So my next step is going to sew 1/4 of an inch from this corner over to the green pin, and then back stitch, stitch here all the way to the end and back stitch. Now I want my corners to lay straight, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these corners off on both of these edges, and then so that when I turn it inside out it will lay straight. Okay, so that's next on the agenda. Okay, I've got one side pulled out. I've gone in there and I've tried to get my corners as straight as I possibly can, and I have left this side to do on camera. So you see how I've got this? I tried to not go all the way in, but I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim off that whole corner, because you want to get rid of some of that bulky fur so it'll lay flat. And if you want to, for a good measure, because this is so furry, you might want to go ahead and trim a little extra if you can, so you can get a nice smooth finish on that edge. But don't cut your stitches, because you really need those so you don't have an opening in your, obviously you don't want to cut those. Okay, so the easiest way that I could say to get this turned back around to the front is put your finger in there and see if you can grab the armhole, because once you can get that armhole, you can just pull it directly right out and push it to the front. So you can either take like one of your turners and get that one corner out to the edge, or just take a pin and work it out with a pin. Either way will work. But I've already decided on this one that I'm not going to top stitch, because I think it will ruin the look of this jacket. Okay, so all I have right now is that little opening between the two green pins, and I'm going to have to go in there and hand stitch it closed. But that is how to make a reversible vest with fur. But like I said, you don't have to use the fur. You can use any kind of fabrics, but that is the fur version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush, just a plain old brush, and brush out the edge seams here, so I can bring all that fur out of that out of those seams. See, you can see right here that that fur is all caught up in those in that bottom row of stitching. So, but a brush will bring it right out and give it all fluffy again. And that's your reversible vest. So now all I have to do is make a pair of fur boots and maybe a brown pair of pants, or brown shorts, a brown skirt, and I'll have a full outfit. Okay, so I'll talk to you next time.